All right. And thank you, good people, for hanging on to this episode of the Real Leaders Podcast with Meagan Kaiser. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did, folks. And again, this episode will be edited and produced, released this weekend on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. And we had a few questions fly in today, Meagan. And the first one is from Peter Harper. And he asks, I'd love to hear Meagan's viewpoint on the GMO labeling of food. Now, this came in a little bit earlier. I know you shared it. Let's address that question again.
Yeah, so I think it's really important labeling is very important. I personally don't have issue with GM food products or CRISPR products. And I think that if consumers want to know the differentiation, it's important to have that. I think it's disingenuous for some products that there is no GM. I think, I don't want to quote a number, but it's like less than 20 food products are actually GM or have a GM option. And so I think that that's a more of a food manufacturer's issue of listening to their consumer. Sure. But I think that the reason that we use GM products, GM seeds on our farm is that they make us more sustainable, that we get more yield with less inputs, less passes, and that is a good thing for our model. Now, we also work with organic producers. I have lots of friends who are non-GM producers, and that's because they have a market for it. And so that's the thing is, I think it's important for both farmers and consumers to be aware that we don't want to grow something that nobody's going to buy. And so, and there's other industrial uses for GM than necessarily directly to consumer, a human consumer. So that's my answer, I guess. But I think that if transparency has never been a bad idea.
Oh, I mean, from a business perspective, it seems like you're letting the market decide, and you got to be paying attention to it. It seems pretty straightforward to me. Let's stay on this topic. Another one flew in from Madeline today, and she asks, what are your thoughts on pesticide/herbicide use, particularly the impact on ecosystems and consumer health?
That's a deep question. First of all, I think ecosystem and consumer health should be top of mind always. So with that in mind, we have we take a lot of care on when we apply things. Again, what we're using when we are using a pesticide or herbicide on our farm, they actually help less passes over the field. So like we're not going to have to continually go over. If we put on a good pre-emergent, that we can usually get ground cover before the next weeds come from their seeds. Again, also having the utilization of cover crops. We focus on our weed minimalization from the very start and throughout the year after harvest to prevent them from coming in. So I think that everybody's going to have some weed prevention. And for us, we do utilize pesticides and herbicides in particular. And that leads to a healthier crop.
Meagan, appreciate you answering these difficult questions. You're doing a really good job, and we've got more of them. So stay tuned. Julie asks, with so many challenges today around food insecurity and hunger, especially with COVID job losses, is there anything you know of with the farming community that is being done or could be done to help ease these major issues? Bumper crops, community distribution channels, et cetera, ?
Well, that's a deep question. Again, it's a big country, so there's a lot going on. I've seen a lot of beautiful examples, especially through Farm Bureau. They almost every state had a hunger, some sort of. Actually, they had a competition between states of ways to serve communities, and we talk about like no hunger holidays, where we contribute to make sure that we have a community food drive, basically, that everybody has a turkey at Thanksgiving and all the fixings. And we utilize that time to really talk about the farmers who produce that food too, and draw a better connection. I think that we talk about gleaners, where they kind of go in, and some produce may not be as pretty for the shelf, but it's still nutritious, it's still good, it's not rotten, it might just be not shaped that looks perfectly pretty in the grocery store, and being able to donate those food items. I think also, just talking about COVID, the mental health issue in agriculture has been very dramatic. And we're openly talking about that more. And I think it's really important. You can feel very isolated anyway in agriculture, and then you add in a pandemic, and it can be very isolating. And I think, we're just not that different from the rest of the world in those aspects. I don't know if I answered that question very well, but those are some of the things that come to mind.
I think you did just fine. We have another one coming in from Mark, and Mark asks, what do you see as the pros and cons of countries that live on plant-based diets, and what can the U.S. learn from them?
So one of the initiatives that the United Soybean Board has really focused on is called Protein First. And soybeans are a very high protein crop. And so whatever source of protein you want, that's where we're your choice. If you want our soy protein through the form of an animal, that we can provide that. We provide very nutritious feed. But at the same time, if you prefer to have protein, plant-based protein, soy is often a big part of that. And so I think the important part that farmers, or at least I myself am very focused on, is hunger. We want you to have affordable food, affordable, nutritious, delicious food. And that's the role that we try to play.
And the last question talks and asks about the labor force itself. How can your industry better protect farm workers from exploitation?
Well, I think that's one of the places that the U.S. Really shines, is that we have a pretty robust labor laws. We don't have child labor, issues like other parts of the world. And if anything, we do have a labor shortage, and it's manual labor in a lot of cases. And so there's definitely a labor shortage. So we have jobs. We have a lot of jobs. It's actually very difficult to find, somebody willing to truck your grain from the farm to the elevator. Finding truckers recently has been very difficult. So I guess I don't know anything more specific than that. On our farm, all of our workers are either also own land, and by all of ours, and there's 5 of us, it's 3 families, and that are all, landowners as well. And so we are all divvying up the duties and doing the best that we can. But that's my experience, I guess, is the best I can speak to that.
Well, I think you did a really good job, Meagan, and thank you for answering these difficult questions. And these questions are kind of just bringing up, for me, just how little we know and how much information is out there. Like you mentioned, one of the number one things that is a problem is awareness. Actually, it had nothing to do with the soil. It's just kind of just around awareness. And so when you say a real leader is someone who can listen, what do you think is getting in the way of this awareness and this listening? Because all those questions were great, but however, very kind of almost not negative, but like kind of the downsides of farmers that have been out in the media.
Yeah, those are the kind of the normal questions that we hear a lot. And so, yeah, it does have a little bit of like, well, yeah, you say all this, but you guys must be polluting the earth, or you might, that kind of feeling. And when I look at my farm, it's anything but. We work really hard to make sure that we have not only that we're not polluting, but that we are improving the earth and our water. And I think, we watch the national news, the world news too. I think everybody kind of has a little bit of a problem with listening to each other lately. And that I think maybe my mom told me this at a young age, maybe nobody's all good and nobody's all bad. And if we kept that in mind a little bit, you can disagree with people. You can think, oh, that's not the best, and still have respect for them and understand that they probably have some knowledge that you can gain. But that's a tough thing. if you're really ingrained in what you believe, that not to like force it on somebody else, but to listen and see if you have any flexibility. And that's, it's not like, oh, I've perfected this, but it's what keeps us kind of going. And my friend Polly Ruland always says better every day. And I think that's the best we can do.
That's the process. That's the philosophy of a farmer, is to continually increase, be more efficient, optimize. And it seems like, I learned a lot about soil science today, Meagan, a lot about agriculture, but I think the major overall lesson was more about just like the wisdom aspect of listening and being open to actually what's going on. Because all the research, when I tried to prepare for this, was all kind of negative. It had a negative slant on a lot of these different things. It's really tough to find, good, credible, reliable information out there.
It is. And of course, food is very personal. It's going into our bodies. It's something that we all rely on. And, I think back to when I had my first baby, reading the mommy blogs, and how judgmental the food aspect could be. And I think that, there was like shaming over, oh, you didn't buy this kind of food for your baby. That's not necessary. I think that if we high tides raise all ships, and if we work really hard to make really nutritious food, we focus on our soil to have really nutritious soil, to have really nutritious crops, that we don't have to have like these harsh judgments. But, when we talk about pesticide and herbicide, I want to use as little as possible,
right, both
for environmental reasons and economic reasons. So it's not in my best interest to overutilize those things or to use them in a foul manner.
Sure.
And I think sometimes we have to give each other the benefit of the doubt. But I don't feel bad about someone asking that question, because if I didn't know it, I'd be curious too, because I'm going to feed that to my kid. I'm going to feed it to myself. Transparency and talking about these issues is very important.
Meagan, I learned a lot today. Thank you so much for coming on. Appreciate your time. Are there any last words you'd like to share with our guest today?
Oh, I just think, we all have a footprint. Like, we all have an impact that we have on the earth. And, we have to think of things in full cycles and full circles. And, if I do any one thing, there will be another action or reaction. And we think about that a lot on the farm. And my hope is that because we think about it so much, the products that we produce on the farm will just be a part of society that makes everybody a little bit more green and a little bit better off.
It's crazy to think about. For Meagan Kaiser, I'm Kevin Edwards, asking you out there. And always, folks, keep it real. Thanks, Meagan.
Thanks, Kevin.